The government banned it, not because it failed, not because it crashed, because it worked too well. In 1961, Southern Pacific pulled a locomotive off a West German factory floor, the Krauss-Maffei ML 4000, a hydraulic diesel so powerful it embarrassed every American-built engine on the market. Within months, the Association of American Railroads had quietly moved to strangle it, with parts embargoes and maintenance blacklists, the kind of invisible ban that never makes headlines but ends careers. Southern Pacific and the Rio Grande kept running them anyway, in secret, on remote mountain routes for 3 decades. The official story was reliability concerns. The real story was that the American locomotive industry could not let a German engine humiliate them on their own tracks, so they made it disappear. But here's what they couldn't erase. What actually happened the day the Krauss-Maffei ran full throttle on Donner Pass. In the spring of 1959, the Southern Pacific Railroad found itself boxed in by the Sierra Nevada. Freight trains were getting longer, heavier, and harder to move up the mountain. The company's own committee minutes, preserved in the Roseville archive, spell out the problem in plain numbers. 10 locomotives lashed together, still stalling on the 2.2% grade of Donner Pass. The best American engines, EMD F7s, GP9s, even the big Fairbanks Morse Trainmasters, could not keep pace. The mountain did not care about marketing claims or manufacturer pride, it just demanded horsepower, and the fleet's 2,400 horsepower ceiling was not enough. President Donald Russell sat at the head of the June 1959 board meeting, staring at a shortfall no domestic builder could close. The minutes record his words. "We need a single unit with more than 3,500 horsepower. Detroit says wait. I say look further." That directive sent the engineering staff beyond the usual suppliers. The technical memos from that summer are laced with urgency, references to European diesel hydraulic concepts, to Maybach engines and Voith transmissions, to the possibility that the answer might lie not in La Grange or Erie, but in a factory outside Munich. The search was not just for raw power. Russell's order demanded continuous tractive effort, something that could grip the rails at low speed and never let go, even on wet mountain steel. Southern Pacific's internal files describe the need for torque that did not vanish above 5 miles per hour, for a transmission that could deliver power without the abrupt, bone-rattling jerk of electric traction. The invisible hand of hydraulic torque, power without gears, just fluid and pressure, was suddenly on the table. In the shadows of the boardroom, a quiet gamble was taking shape. No one knew yet how far it would reach. February 14, 1961. The first Krauss-Maffei ML 4000, unit number 9100, rolled out of Roseville, coupled to a westbound freight, pointed straight at the wall of the Sierra. Crew logs from that morning read like a sensory field report. A cold dawn, the sharp metallic scent of hydraulic oil already drifting through the cab before the engine even turned over. When the Maybach FO 16 engines fired, they did not growl like EMD 645. They spooled up with a turbine whine, a high sustained note that Southern Pacific engineers would soon call the German banshee. On the radio, conductor Larry Haynes described it as a sound you felt in your teeth before you heard it in your ears. At 8:45 a.m., unit number 9100 took the signal at Norden, hauling 2,100 tons of loaded coal. The dispatcher's register shows a steady 26 miles per hour over the summit. Not a slip, not a stall. The Voith transmission, 3 stages of fluid-coupled torque, no gears, no mechanical lag, delivered power with an organic, almost liquid, smoothness. Veteran engineer Tom Ortiz wrote in his log, "Hydraulic hum rose, smoke smelled sweet, held 2,500 horsepower for 12 minutes up the grade. Never felt a kick, just a steady push, like the mountain was folding underneath us." The mountain does not lie. On the steepest stretch, the ML 4000's drawbar pull held at 78,000 pounds force. That was 18% more than the best EMD SD-24 could manage on the same run. For the first time, crews watched the oil temperature, not just the speedometer. The cab filled with a warm, medicinal scent as the transmission heated up, but the gauges stayed steady. By the time unit number 9100 crested Donner Summit, the old rules were broken. Power, delivered by the invisible hand of hydraulic torque, had rewritten what was possible on American rails. Inside the steel frame of the Krauss-Maffei ML 4000, numbers became reality. Each locomotive carried two Maybach MD 870 V16 engines, each rated at 1,770 horsepower at 1,800 revolutions per minute. Factory test sheets from Allach confirmed a combined crankshaft output of 3,960 horsepower. But Southern Pacific and Denver and Rio Grande Western cared less about peak numbers and more about what reached the rails. After accounting for a 7% loss through the Voith 3-stage torque converter transmission, actual drawbar output settled around 3,600 horsepower, a figure backed by Southern Pacific's 1963 performance memos and dynamometer runs at the Krauss-Maffei plant. The Voith transmission defined the ML 4000's hydraulic system. Unlike diesel electrics, where the engine spins a generator to power traction motors, the ML 4000 used hydrodynamic torque conversion. 3 fluid-coupled pump turbine stages shifted automatically with engine speed, delivering a continuous, gearless flow of torque from engine to axle. There was no clutch, no mechanical jerk, just fluid under pressure, multiplying torque at low speeds and smoothing delivery as the train accelerated. Engineers described it as a steady surge, not the abrupt kick of electric traction. On steep grades, this difference meant the line between stalling and climbing. Test data from Krauss-Maffei acceptance runs and Southern Pacific's onboard recorders made the advantage clear. At 5 miles per hour or less, the Voith converter could triple torque, delivering a starting tractive effort of 106,000 pounds of force. That figure surpassed even the EMD SD42, with about 30% less wheel slip due to the fluid coupling. At 12 miles per hour, continuous tractive effort held at 78,000 pounds of force, outpulling the best American units by 16 to 18% on the same run. On the 2.2% grade at Donner Pass, the ML 4000's drawbar held steady while electric units struggled for grip. The Voith V2C3S gearbox was a sealed oil-filled housing cooled by a dedicated hydraulic oil circuit and an auxiliary oil-to-water heat exchanger. During descents, a hydrodynamic brake absorbed kinetic energy, transferring it into the transmission oil. The lack of a dynamic braking resistance bank, a standard on American diesels, meant that on long downgrades, oil temperatures soared. Reports logged oil at 130 degrees Celsius after 20 minutes on a 4% grade, sometimes triggering automatic shutdowns. Maintenance bulletins from Roseville shops called for auxiliary coolers and stricter brake limits. But the core design remained unchanged. The ML 4000 weighed 96 metric tons, or about 212,000 pounds, fitting within the AAR's 22-ton per axle rule. Its 6-axle CC underframe distributed the load evenly. Adhesion tests measured a wheel slip coefficient of 0.32, higher than the SD24's 0.28, allowing more usable tractive effort on wet or oily rail, a crucial edge in mountain territory. Factory and field data told the same story. The ML 4000's real strength was smooth, relentless torque at near zero speed. Where electric traction faded, hydraulic torque kept pushing. Above 12 miles per hour, hydraulic losses grew and drawbar horsepower dropped as oil temperatures climbed. On flat track at 5 miles per hour, the locomotive put down 2,900 horsepower at the drawbar. On a 4% grade, with the hydrodynamic brake active and oil running hot, that figure fell to 2,650. In tunnels, poor ventilation pushed the system to its limits. Engine overheat alarms, fluid contamination, and in the worst cases, shutdowns that stranded trains halfway up the mountain. For a few years, the myth of the 4,000 horsepower German monster gave way to a more precise truth: 3,960 at the crank, about 3,600 at the drawbar, and a torque curve that American builders could not match below 5 miles per hour. The mountain does not lie, and neither did the numbers. On the steepest mile of Donner Pass, the numbers stopped being theory. Southern Pacific's own logs, stamped confidential and filed in Roseville, tell the story in columns of tractive effort and axle load. The ML 4000 held 78,000 pounds force at the drawbar, mile after mile, where the EMD SD24s topped out at 66,000. That is an 18% advantage, not a marketing claim, but a figure recorded by dispatchers and backed by dynamometer runs. The mountain does not lie. On a 2.2% grade, the German hydraulic machine out pulled its American rivals with room to spare. The raw figures rippled through the industry. Tractive effort. At low speed, 106,000 pounds. Force starting, 78,000 continuous at 12 miles per hour, was not just a paper advantage. It meant that a single ML 4000 could move trains that stalled 10-unit EMD lash-ups. The wheel slip coefficient, measured at 0.32, gave the hydraulic 6-axle frame a crucial edge on wet rail compared to the SD24's 0.28. Crews noticed the difference before they saw it on the gauges. The sound of the Voith converter, a high-frequency whine, the so-called German banshee, carried down the line, rising in pitch as the fluid coupling multiplied torque. Conductors described the sensation as organic, a surge instead of a jolt, and the smell of hot hydraulic oil, sweet, almost medicinal, filled the cab before the temperature needle even moved. Industry insiders tracked the data with growing unease. The AAR's rulebook set a hard ceiling, 22 tons per axle, no exceptions. The ML 4000's 212,000-pound frame distributed its weight across 6 axles, keeping each one just under the limit. EMD's engineers, reading the performance sheets, saw a threat to their dominance. Internal memos from Lagrange questioned the adhesion figures, hinting at unproven European methods and warning about the lack of dynamic brake resistor banks on the hydraulic units. But on the mountain, the numbers spoke for themselves. The ML 4000's Voith transmission delivered power at near zero speed, where electric traction faded. Below 5 miles per hour, the hydraulic drive's torque curve stayed strong, something no American diesel-electric could match. Denver and Rio Grande Western took notice. Their own test runs over Tennessee Pass confirmed what Southern Pacific had found. The ML 4000's continuous tractive effort gave it a decisive edge on steep, winding grades. Denver and Rio Grande Western imported 3 units, fitting them into the same axle load rule, and began logging similar results: higher starting pull, less wheel slip, and a progressive surge that made the mountain feel smaller. But the data did not just circulate in engineering offices. Word spread through shop floors and union halls, fueling rumors that American builders were lobbying for new certification rules. The AAR's technical committee started reviewing axle load calculations, wheel slip coefficients, and maintenance records with unusual intensity. Internal correspondence flagged the ML 4000's lack of dynamic brake resistor banks as a potential hazard on long descents, even as Southern Pacific's logs showed that real-world incidents were rare. The invisible hand that once described hydraulic torque, power without gears or direct coupling, now began to feel like something else, a market force tightening its grip. EMD's reaction grew sharper. Parts suppliers quietly delayed shipments. Maintenance bulletins circulated with warnings about non-standard components. The industry's gatekeepers were watching, and the mountain data had put them on edge. The numbers were undeniable, but the welcome was wearing thin. October 22, 1962. The Association of American Railroads Technical Committee met behind closed doors in Washington, D.C. The minutes from that day, stamped confidential and circulated only to member railroads, carry a chilling clarity. On page 3, the minutes record a motion. Motion to suspend certification of all new hydraulic transmission locomotives for U.S. mainline service, pending comprehensive safety and maintenance review. Vote: 13 in favor, 2 opposed. The justification cited axle loading, 22 tons per axle, the same figure the ML 4000 met in every test, and the absence of dynamic brake resistor banks, even though Southern Pacific's own logs showed the real-world incidents were rare. But the language of the memo goes further. It lists a parts embargo. Member roads are advised that procurement of Krauss-Maffei hydraulic components, including torque converters, oil pumps, and heat exchangers, shall be denied to all non-compliant operators. This was not a government action. The Interstate Commerce Commission, the only federal body with regulatory power, never issued a ban. No ICC docket, no public filing, no hearing. The so-called ban was a private vote, orchestrated by the industry itself. Everyone calls this the government ban. Here is the uncomfortable truth. The ICC never formally banned anything. What actually happened was more insidious. The AAR, a private industry body, voted to stop certifying hydraulic transmission locomotives for US service. That is not a government ban. That is a cartel move. The government did not do this. The industry did it to itself, to protect itself from a better product. The effect was immediate. Within weeks, parts shipments from Germany were halted. Maintenance shops received blacklists. The invisible hand that once described hydraulic torque, power without direct coupling, now pressed down as a market force, quietly strangling the future of the ML 4000. The mountain did not lie, but the paperwork made sure its verdict would never reach the rest of the country. Denver and Rio Grande Western crews kept their ML 4000 locomotives running long after the embargo took hold. On March 15, 1965, the Denver and Rio Grande Western Mechanical Department filed its last requisition for spare parts, hydraulic oil filters, Voith transmission seals, and a crate of Maybach injectors sent direct to Munich. The Colorado Railroad Museum still holds the original order, stamped and signed, a quiet act of defiance as the parts embargo pinched off the supply chain. In the mountain yards, shopmen stretched oil change intervals far past the recommended 5,000 miles. They scavenged bearings from sidelined units, patched up cracked drive shafts, and logged every hour in battered maintenance ledgers. Each repair was a small protest against the invisible hand now closing around the fleet. Southern Pacific, by contrast, retreated under pressure. Internal storage orders from Roseville, dated November 1969, list units number 9105 through 9110 as officially stricken. The memo used clinical language, units withdrawn from service, awaiting disposition. No mention of performance, only the cold arithmetic of parts unavailability and mounting downtime. The final run over Donner Pass came without ceremony. A westbound freight with the banshee whine of the hydraulic drive echoing through the tunnels one last time. Crews later recalled the sweet, medicinal scent of hot hydraulic oil drifting in the cab. A sensory footnote to a technology erased not by technical failure, but by a market that closed ranks. The ML 4000's exit was not a dramatic collapse, but a slow, administrative suffocation. Denver and Rio Grande Western held out a little longer, their last units retired by the end of 1965. The official story blamed reliability, weight, and maintenance. The real story is written in requisition logs, storage orders, and the silence that followed, enforced not by law, but by the industry's own hand. November 1969. Southern Pacific's roster sheets record the quiet removal of the last ML 4000s. Units number 9105 through 9110 shifted from active duty to storage. The internal memo used stripped language. It said, "Units withdrawn from service, awaiting disposition." No photographs, no farewell. Just a line item in Roseville's logistics file, closing the book on the most ambitious diesel hydraulic experiment American railroading ever attempted. These locomotives were not scrapped outright. They sat in the back lots, sheet metal cooling, hydraulic lines slowly weeping oil into the ballast, their Maybach engines silent. The banshee whine that once echoed off Donner Pass tunnels faded to memory. By the end of that year, the ML 4000's American chapter was over, not with a wreck or a blaze, but with a storage order and a silence enforced by paperwork. The story would not end here. Across the Atlantic, hydraulic power would find a different fate. Across the Alps, the story took a different turn. While American railroads quietly parked their hydraulic units, engineers in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland doubled down. Today, Voith transmissions, descendants of the same three-stage torque converters that once rattled the windows at Donner Pass, still power mainline locomotives over the Gotthard, the Brenner, and the Arlberg. The OEBP Class 2016 Hercules and the SBM 843 fleets, both running Voith hydrodynamics, move freight through tunnels and over grades that would humble any diesel-electric. Swiss and Austrian operators report continuous tractive effort ratings above 300 kilonewtons, with modern oil cooling systems that shrug off the heat that once doomed the ML 4000. European crews describe the same smooth, gearless surge, torque delivered as a living force, not a mechanical jolt. The irony is hard to miss. The technology that American railroads embargoed for being too unconventional now forms the backbone of Alpine heavy haul. The mountain doesn't lie, and in Europe, the invisible hand of hydraulic power keeps pushing, long after its American chapter fell silent. Today, the ML 4000's echo still haunts the gradient, evidence that the mountain doesn't lie, even when the record does. The ICC never banned hydraulic power. The AAR cartel did, shielding incumbents from a better answer. In an era obsessed with innovation, the invisible hand still chooses what survives and what disappears. Some truths, like torque at 5 miles per hour, refuse to vanish. Your thoughts belong below.